and greetings from Australia. My name is Ruth and I am an Australian immigration law practitioner here in Australia. Well, in today's video, I would like to share with you 4 things you must know for skilled migration in Australia. So it's specifically for skilled migrants who are looking at the skilled visa stream. Okay. Now, please do not treat the information in this video as legal or migration advice because we assess each case on a case-by-case basis. However, we know that the contents of this video will add value to your pursuit for Australian migration. Well, so what are the 4 things you must know for skilled migration Australia? Well, the first one is know the occupation list. What is that? Well, Australia immigration is very, very interesting in a sense that we have so many different kinds of occupation list. We have the medium to long-term list, we have the short-term list, and we have the regional list. Now, if this is your first time hearing this, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, what is that? Why such interesting names, right? Well, put it this way, I like to simplify it by saying we have the very, very hot list where if your occupation or your skill is part of that list, then you'll have a lot of different visa opportunities. And then we have the okay hot list. It's not that hot on immigration list. So with that, you may be eligible for certain types of visas, but not all types, but you're still eligible for certain types of visas if you meet the specific requirements. And then you have the not very hot list, which makes it more difficult to find visa options. And for occupations that might not be on the very hot list, there may be further requirements that you need to fulfill in order to migrate to Australia. So the first one is to know the occupation list. And so it's so important to know where your skill level is at, and each occupation has a different requirement. And usually the government will look at ANZSCO. ANZSCO spells ANZSCO. So usually we will have a look at it on the government website to compare the occupation that you think you might be eligible with the level of skill required. So for example, if you are, let's say, an agricultural scientist, right? Then you must show that you've got a bachelor's degree or higher. In some cases, depending on the situation, you may be able to meet those requirements with ample work experience. So it really depends on the occupation because all of them are fairly different. But you need to know your occupation and then know whether your occupation sits on the very, very hot list or the okay hot list or the not very hot list. And from there, you'll be able to maneuver to see which visa type would suit you best. Okay, so that's number 1, know the occupation list. Number 2, you must meet the skills test. Some call it skills assessment. Now, this is very, very important. So generally, the Department of Education is responsible for this. So it's not something that Immigration Australia would handle. And the assessing authority, so these are your examiners, people who would say whether you meet Australia standard, they will depend on the type of occupation that you would like to nominate yourself under. For example, if you are a lawyer, then the law society of the particular state will have to assess your qualification and your work experience. If you are a tradesperson, such as if you're a carpenter or mechanic, or if you're a welder, then it will go to a different assessing authority, and they'll ask for specific documents. And if you're a nurse, it will go through NMAC Australia. If you're a doctor, it will go through the Medical Board of Australia. So it really depends on the type of occupation that you would like to nominate yourself under. And each of them has a different requirement for the different occupations. So it's so important that you meet the skills test, because if you don't, then you cannot go forward with your visa. So I usually advise my client, if you are looking at skilled migration, the first thing you need to do is to get your skills test or your skills assessment done. And previously, the results were valid for 2 years, some less, but right now immigration has extended the time frame to say it is valid for 3 years. So that's great, because that would really help with any job opportunities in the future which may be available to you. But also because it's valid for 3 years, if you get it done now and you then take other steps to migrate to Australia, it's still valid for 3 years. So I think it's a great investment. It's also, skills test is also great if you're looking for work visas, etc. So coming back to this, it is so important, so important that you meet skills test, and that's the first thing on the list that you need to meet. Okay, so that's number 2. The third thing you must know to migrate to Australia is to meet the points test. So points test is very important. So at this point, the minimum points that you must have in order to submit an expression of interest, and I'm going to go into details about how that works, is 65 points. So you need 65 points minimum to submit an expression of interest. And points are allocated based on the varying factors, and we're going to go through them. So first of all, points can be allocated if you are between a certain age. So at this point, the cutoff age for skilled migration is usually at 45. If you're over 45 years old, then usually the skilled migration option is not the best option for you. But if you're in your 20s and your 30s, then the skilled migration option would be fantastic. If you're anywhere between 25 to 32, you will have maximum points at 30 points. If you're between 33 to 39, then you can still claim 25 points, but the older you get, and can I just say, 30s, 40s is not old at all, but in immigration's eyes, the older you get, the fewer points you have, and in some cases it will sort of go down to 15 points. So if it is your intention to migrate, I would say don't leave it till too late. Start now. Even if you're not ready to move here now, you can start, taking steps for skills assessment, go for your English test, etc. Okay. And points are also allocated for your qualifications. So usually, if your qualification is recognized in Australia, and that's why the skills test is so important, because that is proof in itself to say that you are qualified according to Australia standard. So if, let's say, you've done a bachelor's degree from overseas and it's assessed to be comparable to Australia standard, then you can claim up to 15 points. If it's a trade qualification or diploma, then usually it's about 10 points. Master's degree is usually about 15, but you can only choose, with a bachelor's or master's. So you can't claim 15 for master's and 15 for bachelor's. You just claim the one. But if you've got PhD, wow, then you get 20 points. So you get points for qualification. And if you have qualification in specific sectors such as science and engineering, and potentially the Department of Home Affairs will award you with additional points. If you studied in Australia for a minimum of 2 years and you meet the Australian study requirement of 92 weeks, etc., there's a whole list of what you need to meet. But if you've studied in Australia for a minimum time frame, then potentially you can claim another 5 points. And if you studied in an Australian regional area, then there's another 5 points. The next points claimable is English test. Now, English test is required for applicants in most countries unless you can claim an exemption. So basically, if you meet competent English, then you would have met the minimum requirement for the skilled visa. However, competent English does not give you any points. So the points awarded for that is 0. For that reason, even for our clients who might be exempted from going for the English test, such as if they hold a New Zealand passport, UK, USA, Canada, Ireland, we would still advise our clients to go ahead and do an English test, because if you do an English test and you meet proficient English, you get 10 points. If you meet superior English, you get 20 points. And I know that English test is not the easiest thing to do. I personally had to go through English tests years and years ago, and but you study for it. So it's important that you do practice tests. I mean, there are colleges or online courses that are available for you to do a practice test, and it's so important to know the format of the test. You are usually tested based on the 4 components, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Okay, so if you've done a couple of tests before, then it would be easier when you get into the exam hall. You're not like, oh my goodness, having a stage fright or something. So I would definitely recommend that you do practice tests before going forward with the English test. And a new requirement has been introduced by the Australian Immigration. So currently, if you're single means you're not in a de facto or you're not married, then potentially you get another 10 points. However, if you do have a partner and your partner is also from the same country as where you're from, and if your partner meets competent English, if they go and do an English test and they meet competent English, then they can also donate 5 points to you. And at the same time, if they have undergone a skills assessment test or skills test that is comparable with Australia's standard, potentially they can donate another 5 points. In some cases, our clients speak multiple languages, and for that reason, if you speak another language or you can read and write in another language and you're fairly good at it, you can also look at becoming a translator. Now with that, it has to go through a specific authority in Australia, which is NAATI and AATI, so you can Google that. You can sit for a test, and if you pass the test, you get a certificate, and with that you get an additional 5 points. Okay, so 65 points is minimum to lodge an expression of interest. Now, unlike other types of visas such as student visas, work visas, or like family partner visas, with the other types of visas, once you've met the requirement, you can go ahead and lodge a visa application. But the skilled visa is different now, because you have to actually submit what we call an expression of interest. Okay, so what you're saying is, hi, my name is Ruth, I've got 65 points or more. I would like to express my interest to apply for a visa in Australia. So when you submit an expression of interest, it is actually a computerized system. So it's not usually handled by a human being, okay? And that's why it's so important for you to get as many points as you can, because you're essentially competing with people who are all over the world. They could be in Australia, they could be overseas. And so if, let's say, for example, Ruth has 65 points, okay? And let's say Bob has 100 points and John has 90 points. And we all apply and we all say, oh, we are lawyers and we want to apply. So every now and then the government would open up the portal, right? And they will say, okay, for this month, we will need 10 lawyers, for example. This is just an example. So first of all, they will select the ones with the highest points. So Bob will get selected first because he's got 100 points, and John, who's got 90 points, will get selected. And once they've met the quota, they will close the portal. And so Ruth here is sitting waiting, going, oh my goodness, I haven't heard from them yet. So this could be like months or even some people would wait up to 2 years and they never get an invitation to apply. So for that reason, it is so important that you do everything you can to get as many points as possible. And it's so important as well that at the time you submit an expression of interest, you have to have met all the criteria. For example, if you think, oh, I'm going to go sit for an English test and I think I'm going to get 10 points, but at the time you submit an expression of interest, you haven't actually met those requirements, then potentially you can get into trouble. Even if you get an invitation to apply, immigration can refuse your visa based on the fact that you have submitted the false information at the time you submit an expression of interest. So you want to have all your ducks lined up. You want to have all the documents done. Now that doesn't mean that you can't go back then and update your expression of interest. What I mean by that is, for example, right now I have a client who has gone for an English test. She actually achieved 10 points, but she said she's going to try and sit for another English test because she was so close to getting 20 points except for one component. So with that, if she sits for another English test and she passes, then we can log back in to the system and update her expression of interest, and as such she will be bumped up on the expression of interest list. So you can always update that, okay? And depending on the type of occupation you have, remember the first thing I talked about was occupation list. Some occupations will not enable you to apply for an independent skilled visa, which means you have to have either a state or territory to sponsor you. In some cases, the states will give you up to 15 points, in some only 5. So the difference between those two are, with the 5 points, it is a permanent residency visa, whereas with the 15 points, it is a temporary residency visa. So at this stage, it's called a 491 visa, 491. And the visa is granted for 5 years if you're successful, and you have to work and live in a designated area for that state or territory for a minimum of 3 years and earn a minimum of $53,900 each year. If you've met those requirements within that 5 years, you can actually transition into a permanent residency visa. So just be aware that not all occupations will allow you to do it yourself. In some cases, you have to have a state or territory to sponsor you. And if you've got family members in Australia, you can also go through the 491 stream under the family sponsored stream. And again, that's 15 points awarded to you, which will bump you up the system. So you are very likely to get an invitation to apply a lot quicker. But again, to be eligible for that, you have to meet the occupation list requirement. Okay. So to summarize, the 4 things you must know to apply for a skilled visa is: number 1, know the occupation list, know where you fit under, whether it's an independent visa or whether it's eligible for family sponsorship or state or a territory sponsorship, and know the requirement of that state to see if you meet those requirements. Some states or territories might require you to show that you are a graduate of that state. You know, some would say, well, you have to be a PhD graduate. Some would say, well, you have to show us that you have a job offer in this particular state, etc., etc. The second thing is you must meet the skills test. And again, that's valid for 3 years. It's not time wasted. I call it's time invested, and it's money invested because it lasts for 3 years. And if you meet that requirement, then you can go forward. And if you don't, then you might have to think about, okay, what are my other visa options? Or do I try and apply for the skills test under a different occupation, right? The third one is points test. And I've gone through the different points, but 65 points is a minimum. And the fourth one is you must submit an expression of interest and wait until you have an invitation to apply, and do everything you can to meet maximum points possible, because it is a tough competition. So I hope the contents of this video will assist you in your pursuit for Australian migration. And once again, please do not treat the information here as legal or migration advice because each case is different. If you need help, just let us know. You can contact us on the email address below or go on our website and submit a form, and we would be very happy to assist you. But otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and we wish you the very best in your pursuit for Australian migration.